Our final panel for the day is also going to be very interesting. It's on global chickpeas, the Desi outlook. On the panel, we have Peter Wilson from AGT Foods Australia. With Peter on the panel, you know it's always going to be very lively. Please also welcome from Ghazi Commodities, Bangladesh, Fahim Wahab Ghazi. Stepping up next from EMCO International UAE, it's Atheeqe Ansari. From Glencoe Agriculture, Saurabh Bhartia. From Pakistan, Bilal Doni of Doni and Company. And to complete the panel from the Indo-Global SME Chamber, please welcome Dr. Bharat Kulkarni. As we start the panel, I'd like to remind you that this panel has been sponsored by Omega Traders. This is the Global Desi Chickpeas Outlook panel, and it's over to Peter Wilson.
Can you hear me? Put your hand up if you can't hear me. Thanks, Todd. Well, I know that when you speak in the last session, you never want to speak, you never want to keep in between people and their beverages, so we'll try and make this as snappy as we possibly can and as upbeat as it possibly can be given the circumstances we find the international pulse trade in today. So my job is to try and stick-handle this esteemed group on my right and what a talented group they are. So we've got some great numbers people here and people who really understand how the product's being consumed, where it's being consumed, the likely trends for consumption, because we need to be talking about the future. Whilst we have some issues we're dealing with today, at the end of the day, we will continue to produce and consume Desi chickpeas for the same period in the future that we have been in history. So they're an old and very, very useful food product and consumed in large volumes by a huge slice of the world's population. So they're not going anywhere soon, but we have to digest a few little issues in the short term. So I'm going to try and set the scene here this afternoon, and then we're going to sit down with the panellists and try and, I guess, break open the word, which is the Desi chickpea market and its future. As soon as we can work this out, where am I pointing? It's always good when the technology works. So I guess we can ad lib here for a little bit. You just want me to say change, or? All right, so if everybody can make sure they read this statement verbatim, I think that just basically means that anything I say can't be held against me at any stage in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've introduced the panellists, so we can move on to the next slide. But the bottom line is we've got good coverage, good regional coverage, and plenty of skills in the room. Okay, so the issues that we're going to try and cover here today are the supply and demand of the crop we're talking about, but also we're going to talk about the cash supply and demand. We've definitely got some issues in the world today with regards to cash flow and stability and all the rest of it. We're going to talk about open markets versus intervention, and we've got the Colombo Accord to help propel this industry forward and to try and take some ownership back to our national organisations to try and work with our governments to see if we can't convince various countries to play by reasonable rules, but for their own good as well. It's not just a question of people who come from countries like Australia, Canada, the United States or the UK or Europe being angry about what countries like in the Indian sub or the Middle East might do. The reality is that good and fair and free trade is good for everybody. We're going to talk about supply chain integrity because there are people in this room and indeed in this trade that are trying to trade multi-million-dollar contracts and products with no money. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't be in this business if we don't have any money. So if you're a buyer and you think it's fun to say, look, I'll have a crack at this, I'll buy 500 or 1,000 tonnes off Peter Wilson, but I have no intention of executing if the market goes down, then the door is over there. You'll see the light coming in if you can exit. So there is a serious issue. This is a serious business and there needs to be true integrity or an intention to play by contractual rules if you indeed are going to play the game. We know there's a lot of geopolitical instability right now. You'd have to be living under a rock if you weren't aware of the certain issues that are going on in the Indian sub and of course the Middle East and North Africa. There are serious issues that impact global trade. And there's also the reality of the production systems that we have in competition. It's not just Australian farmers competing with Ukrainian farmers or Canadian farmers. We've got production systems in conflict. We've got highly mechanised and industrial agriculture in many parts of the developed world, and we have a lot of very rudimentary agricultural practices being carried out in much of the rest of the developing world. So it's fair to say that there's a bit of a clash of civilisations occurring, but there is still possibilities for us to transfer knowledge between ourselves in terms of the techniques and technologies being used to try and assist all of the production systems to be as profitable as they can be. The other thing that's been raised a couple of times in the last day or so is the reality of water, fresh water availability, water use efficiency, and particularly as we consider pulses as an incredibly powerful vegetable protein in a world that is rapidly getting short of moisture and where production of other forms of protein, namely animal proteins, continues to become more expensive. So it's logical that we're in the right space here, and I think it's important that we talk positively about the role that pulses, but in the particular, the role that Desi chickpeas play with providing good, healthful nutrition, but with a really soft environmental footprint. Okay, so let's talk about the situation that is India in terms of the journey that India has been on since a rapid rise in prices in 2015. And I put a little slide in here. This is where everybody was happy. Prices weren't too bad, and my customer was overall reasonably happy with prices. They became less so as the market expanded in the end of 2015 and of course 2016. Prices skyrocketed, and that we've had a range of government intervention and activities, particularly in India, that sought to soothe the price for the consumer. And then on top of that, we demonetised in there, we got rid of 500,000 rupee notes. That sort of really cruelled a lot of the liquidity that was being involved in a whole range of trades, but in particular the pulse trade. We added a GST. We started raiding offices and asking people to empty their warehouses when it wasn't economic to do so. We raided companies' offices to see whether there was wrongdoing or market manipulation. To my knowledge, at this point, no charges have been laid. So we've had a lot of intervention and really solid and angry intervention, particularly in India, to try and put us to where we are today. And of course, where we are today is a situation where we've got, the farmer with a direct hotline to Modi and saying, we're not making any money, you better help us out. Of course, that's triggered a whole range of other realities in terms of duties and technical bans and quotas, etc., etc. And that's not going away anytime soon for some of the reasons that have already been outlined. We have key things that are going on in India in the next 6 to 12 months, all of them to do with elections. So far be it for me to suggest this is not just about supply and demand. So if we look at, it's hard to have a discussion about pulses and even harder to have a discussion about Desi chickpeas if you're not considering India. So India is the engine room for pulse demand globally. There's no getting away from that. 33%, largest consumer, producer of edible pulses in the world. That's just the reality. The other reality is that we're going to continue to see India require imports. And we'll discuss it. I don't want to preempt what we might discuss, but my personal view is we're really going to struggle to see India self-sufficient on a whole range of things because it'll be like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. They can be sufficient on some things, but that's going to lead into insufficiency or deficit on other things. So it's going to be a rotating issue because we have land use constraints, we have definitely got issues with regards to water availability, and so at the end of the day, we have a very, very large population on a shrinking landmass because of industrialisation, etc., etc. But you can see the impact of legislative change or government intervention where we've seen Indian pulse imports, selected pulse imports, largely collapse since the end of December. And that's going to continue to dry up here as they force the market to consume the stocks that are in position. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but that's just the reality. I always like to talk a little bit about the realities of increasing, and this is what I'm excited about. I'm excited about both these slides, and that is because there has been an uninterrupted, largely uninterrupted, growth in real terms, in real prices for Desi-type chickpeas in India. There is a significant slice of inelasticity in Desi chickpea demand, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And this is where I talk about the spread of Desi chickpeas relative to yellow peas. If we all accept that yellow peas largely have equilibrium, we have yellow peas available at any time of the day or night that someone wants to buy a yellow pea, they're available. So if we accept they're the base load in the yellow pulse or the yellow cotyledon supply equation, then anything that spreads off that it's not an unreasonable argument to talk about whether it's inelastic or elastic in terms of its pricing. And we're seeing over the last several years, we've seen pulses, or certainly Desi chickpeas, increase the price premium relative to yellow peas. So it tells me that there is still solid demand growth in Desi chickpeas in India and for those countries that are consuming the product in similar fashion. So this is a good news slide. But of course, it's a long-term slide, and my view is that trend will continue. Even though we're having a little bit of a gutting right now, I think that trend line will continue to be positive for the spread between peas and Desi chickpeas. That's a slide you can't see very well, but this is, my view is that we don't really have a pulse problem in the world, we have a wheat problem in the world. And the wheat problem in the world is too much wheat. So we're sitting around 37% stocks to use. Now, the market recently is suggesting that wheat is trying to get up off the mat here. I'm not a bull. I can't make a bull case for wheat unless we have a major problem in the Black Sea or somewhere else. And of course, that problem might actually be also developing in Australia. But the reality is we're sitting on about 170 million tonnes of global wheat stocks, largely sitting, doing nothing, being financed by a whole range of people, from the trading houses to banks to farmers. Now, until we can start writing the balance sheet on wheat, now maybe we see feed demand kick in on corn and we start seeing wheat being fed in much greater tonnes to start rebalancing this thing. But this is what's driving acres into alternate crops such as pulses. This is why we're talking about Kazakhstan producing red lentils, because they beat the crap out of growing wheat. And the same decisions are being made by farmers all around the world. But recently, in the last 100 days, we've seen about 20% increase in soy milk futures. We're starting to see protein get some legs here. And guess what? We're trading protein products. Mid-protein, surely, but we're still trading the protein complex. So let's not forget there is a linkage between pulse acres, Desi chickpea acres, and underlying alternatives, which are cereals. and driven by wheat. We'll talk, we won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but there you go. India, the king of pulse shipments, certainly in Desi chickpeas, and that's a slice of 8 years condensed in those destination markets. You can say India is so very important to anybody producing Desi chickpeas. Bangladesh, number 2, sorry Fahim, not quite to number 1, but a little bit of work at it, it'll happen. But, and of course India's not there anymore, Saurabh, so it looks like Bangladesh could actually have a bit of a crack at you. Pakistan, very, very important, not to take anything away from the importance that Pakistan is in terms of the Desi market, and the UAE, and we'll hear from Atheeqe on what's happening in that UAE market. New entrant in terms of direct shipments, we're seeing Iran in there, and Iran took, I think, 30 or 40,000 tonnes during the 16-17 year. So emerging market looking for good quality Desi chickpeas. We now need to see what happens as a result of the decision out of the US overnight in terms of whether Iran continues to emerge as a significant player on the global stage or not. But they are an important market for us all to consider. We know that the king of consumption is India. We also know the king of production of Desi chickpeas in India, with the rest of us a little bit of bagatelle. So changes in Indian consumption and production are significant to the global Desi chickpea market outlook. My view, for what it's worth, because I'm a natural bull, I like being bullish, I'm not looking at this year, because I think this year is done and dusted. Stocks in Australia are horribly tight. They are very tight. If anybody thinks that there is a burdensome position right now in Australia on Desi chickpeas, then they'd be wrong. There is no question the supply burden does sit in India. I'm prepared to acknowledge that. But there is not a supply burden in Australia. And I did some rough numbers in the last couple of days, and for April to the end of our marketing season, which is September, typically we're punching out between 120 and 230,000 tonnes, average of about 180,000 tonnes to be shipped over the next little while until the next crop, assuming we get one. Now, we don't think there's a hell of a lot of product left. So in actual fact, we're very snug for old crop. We've already shipped 650,000 tonnes so far out of potentially an 850,000 crop on top of a 2.1 million tonnes shipped last year. So we didn't have a lot of carry-in. So the Australian situation is actually fairly tight, and therefore it's very, very hard to buy Desi chickpeas today from Australian farmers. So if we porpoise into 2019, I think we see lower production in Australia. I certainly think that we'll see lower seedings in October, November, December in India, and therefore lower production. So I think 2019, look out, get your hat. It's going to be exciting. So in terms of things we want to try and cover, we know the market's turbulent. There's a lot of stuff going on. And as I said yesterday in the Colombo Accord discussion, we've all got to spend a lot more time on the MAD components of our business. That's market maintenance, access and development. We cannot be asleep at the switch in terms of servicing our markets, not just from the importers, but making sure our governments are talking to other governments and making sure we're not doing anything silly. So with that, we'll move to the panel. You ready, guys?
Yep.
Is this working? All right. Okay, so we did meet a little bit earlier, so this is it's sort of rehearsed, but it should be okay. There was a bit of nervousness around the table this morning at breakfast, but I think we had it nailed. So let's talk, we have to talk about India first. India is most important. We have Saurabh, and I've got a lot of time for Saurabh. I always say he's the best numbers man in the Indian subcontinent.
Oh,
In fact, he's probably the only person in India who does numbers, so that makes him, doesn't necessarily make him not necessarily the best, but I think he's genuinely the best. So let's talk a little bit about how we got to where we are and just what's happening today in the Indian market.
Okay, so basically Indian government is struggling with low prices. Their mandate for last 2 years, ever since 2015-16, when they saw pulse prices skyrocketing, is to make Indian to make India as self-sufficient in pulses. We have seen very high prices of chickpeas in 2016 and 2017, and Indian farmer has reacted to the high prices. We have seen record production this year.
What do you think that is?
Well, it's tough to debate on the production numbers because it's a big country. There are very different yield estimates, but I would stick to the base number of government for 2016, say, which was 7 million tons in 2016. In 2017, government says that the production increased by 9.3 million tons. Fair enough, taking that also into consideration because we had good yields last year, we had acreage up, so production increased by 30%. But 2018, when again the government says that the production is up by 2 million tons, I have doubts on that. Yes, we have better crop than last year for sure because there was an increased acreage. But in terms of yield, Indian government is using the record yield that India has ever seen in the past decade. But when we look at the vegetative health index for March 2018 and compare it with the vegetative health index for last 6-7 years, India had the most stressed crop this year compared to the last 5 to 7 years. So in terms of yield, I doubt that we have such a great yield that we can have an 11 million ton crop. But let's, for argument's sake, let's say the crop is like 10.2 million tons compared to 9 million tons of last year.
Is the problem more that we just don't have the liquidity to absorb that product as a farmer wants to sell? Is that the thing that's creating, the lower prices and the turbulence locally?
To an extent, yes. There has been liquidity issues with banks going tight on most of the pulse companies since 2015-16 onwards. A lot of importers in India have had major defaults on the foreign suppliers, but not only that. In their own balance sheets, they have stressed assets and everything because we have seen prices drop from $1,000 to $500 or $600 in chickpeas. $2,000 pigeon peas have come down to $600. Lentils, $1,000 have come down to $400. So these are like massive losses that Indian importers or traders have suffered because of which they have defaulted on their payments to the bank and all those things. So that's why the banks have gone tight in terms of liquidity. But it's not that government is not doing efforts to consume this production that is coming into the market. So far, Indian government has already procured like 800,000 tons in just 30 days. I think by mid-June, Indian government would have procured 1.5 million tons. They have also, in the state of MP, they had asked the farmers not to bring the product into the market until June. They had designated warehouses where farmer could go and deliver his stock, take 10-20% funds that he needs for his needs, and he could sell his crop like in September, October at MSP to the government. So it's not that government is not doing anything. They are doing the efforts to ensure that the farmers are able to sell their product into the market. There are a lot of local traders and companies who are buying in the domestic market at current values because the prices are attractive. So yes, I think it's not that there is no liquidity in the market. Overall, the market is depressed because of oversupply. It's the glut situation, which will get solved in 6 to 7 months.
Thank you. Flipping to, the number 2 market, Fahim, talk a little bit about the Bangladesh market. We've already shipped year to date from Australia about 170,000 tonnes, which since October, with a very, very big March shipment, a couple of bulk vessels going in there. How do you see the balance of the marketing year, and how do you see the Bangladeshi market, generally speaking?
Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Peter for allowing me the opportunity to present the Bangladeshi perspective today. I feel that Bangladesh is often the overlooked middle child of the pulse-buying family, that is the Indian subcontinent. India, of course, is the overachiever. Pakistan is the goofy, free-spirited one.
India's not the overachiever at the moment. It's very naughty.
But give it some time, it'll be accepted back into the fold. Bangladesh has a consumption of about average 200,000 tons, plus minus 20% depending on the price. And compared to India and Pakistan, our consumption pattern is quite different in the sense that only about, I would say, I want to say 5%, but let's say 10% of the Desi chickpeas is actually milled into chana dal or flour. So we use yellow peas for that. Chickpeas is consumed whole. About 90% is consumed whole, either roasted or in a cooked form with the skin.
So size and colour are important?
Size and consistent size and bold size and light seed coat color is very important for us. And there is no really substitute for chickpeas. The demand is there, it's a consistent demand. And
you think
local
it's growing?
Due to the taste, changing consumer taste, the growth rate will be very nominal, according to me. But it will be stable, around the 200, 250. We might see in a couple of years the market going up to 250. But I expect that the growth will not be too high. It'll be nominal growth, yeah.
Wonderful. Flipping to Pakistan, Bilal, Pakistan is starting to reignite in terms of buying. I mean, even though India had very good production, and I think it's indisputed that even though it was a little dry during the production period, much of the Indian Desi area grew a pretty handy crop. I think that's agreed. But once you push in the northwestern part of the Indian sub, which includes Pakistan, it wasn't so good, was it? As a productive output.
No, although India's had a pretty bumper crop in the range of 10 to 10.5 million tons for Desis. On the flip side, it wasn't the case in Pakistan. Our figures came out between 300 to 350,000 tons versus a consumption of 700,000 tons. So we had half the production of what our consumption is, which is why Pakistan has been in the market on and off. And in 2018, year to date, we have imported close to 60 to 70,000 metric tons from Australia. And, we feel that this demand is going to continue because there is a shortfall of product in the local market right now.
So does that suggest for the balance of the year you may have to bring in close to 300,000 tonnes?
For the balance of the year, yes, but the Australian new crop is going to come out in October. The shipments are going to arrive in mid-December, I believe. Until that time, I think Pakistan is going to need another 100,000 tons to satisfy the local demand. And then after that, we're going to roll into buying new crop from Australia as well.
Very good. Bharat, where are you seeing most of the product being produced in Africa? Maybe summarise where you see production at the present time, where it's come from and where it's going, and in terms of production, but also where you see your export destination markets.
Yeah. So Africa, when we say Africa, there are 4 or 5 countries that produce chickpea, the major being Tanzania and Ethiopia, with minor quantities coming from Kenya, Sudan, Uganda, Eritrea. So these are small, but the major comes from Tanzania and Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the largest producer within Africa, with about it's the 7th largest producer of chickpeas, Desi chickpeas in the world. So a lot of chickpeas produced in Ethiopia, average around 300 to 350,000 tons is produced every year. Last 2 years have been much better for the production. Last year the production was around 380,000 tons. Whereas this year it has gone up to close to 420 to 430,000 tons is what is expected. So Ethiopia is major producer, but it's not the major exporter because there's a lot of local demand. About 15 to 20% of the produce gets exported.
That's an interesting point because it's a relatively new product for Ethiopia in terms of new 10 or 15 years, 20 years in volume?
Not really, because the traditional Ethiopian food has an important, if you look at the traditional Ethiopian food, it's injera and shiro. Now, shiro is made out of the powder of, or the flour of chickpeas. So it has been part of their, culinary culture for many years now. So it's not really new to Ethiopia, but yes, export has been new. There's a fasting season in Ethiopia where all the Orthodox Christians fast for 60 days, and they don't consume any meat in that period. That is the time when the consumption of shiro goes up, and that's where the demand for the locally produced chickpeas is higher. Close to 80% of what Ethiopia produces is actually consumed internally. So Ethiopia may be the largest producer in the world, but not so much when it comes to export contribution. Major export destinations of Ethiopia have been Pakistan. India, because the size is a little bit smaller, about 3 to 6 mm is what the Ethiopian Desi chickpea is. So not much of that goes to India, but Pakistan last year they had, and this year again, there are issues because of the phytosanitary issues, where Pakistan has banned the import of Desi chickpeas from Ethiopia. So that has led to accumulation of carryover stock. About 50,000 tons of carryover stock is lying in Ethiopia with some bumper production which has come this year.
What's the local price, say FOB equivalent for Desi's in Ethiopia? Local price, US dollars, FOB.
The current prevailing local price is equivalent to around $600 per ton.
So that's about above
Yes.
where Pakistan is buying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bharat. Moving it, of course, last but not least, Atheeqe, let's talk about the UAE market. I mean, it's an incredible market, incredible story in terms of what has happened in the UAE in terms of Dubai's development as a destination, not just for agri-prods, but for aircraft and just what's happened in that whole region. So let's talk a little bit about why Desi demand in Dubai, where very little is consumed.
Yeah, I mean, Dubai is probably one of the not Dubai, the UAE is probably one of the most inelastic markets when it comes to price, because the consumers don't switch so easily. I mean, it's a little bit I would say high income, but the middle class has a better affording capability than normal. Dubai, I mean, the UAE has been importing chana mainly for splitting, used by the snack manufacturers, and we have not forget the population of the UAE has grown over the last 10 years, almost doubled. So we have a population of close to 9 million people, of which 6 to 7 million people are from the subcontinent. So the main consumption is lentils and peas and chickpeas, of course. We've seen a steady growth over the years. So last year, Dubai imported anywhere between 80 to 100,000 tons. I say anywhere because most of it also, you have not forget, is a very big re-export destination. So Dubai exports a lot of cargo it's used as an export hub from Dubai to Iran and to Iraq and to other neighboring countries. Another interesting development that's taken place over the last 2 years is the consumption of Desis into Iran. So all of a sudden, I mean, of course, there's sanctions and other things, but we've seen a good amount of demand coming from Iran for Desis, which is a part of the staple diet. Like they said in Ethiopia, Iranians also use this as part of their daily nutrition.
They like the size.
They like the size, and believe it or not, there are more than 200 splitting plants. I was just learning this morning in Iran. I mean, small size splitting plants, but mainly for Desis. So the consumption into Dubai of chickpeas, Desi chickpeas is around 100,000 tons, between 80 to 100,000 tons.
Wonderful. So we're seeing obviously some lift in consumption around the place. Is the lower prices Saurabh driving higher usage right now? Because I mean that's the economic theory, isn't it? Lower prices encourage more demand. So are we seeing that happen across a range of pulses, but in particular Desis in India?
Definitely, Desi demand is increasing with lower prices. Let's just take example of last year when the production estimates were 9 million tons against 7 million tons. So we had 2 million tons higher production in India. Still, we had record imports from Australia, 1.1 million tons. So the prices dropped from $1,100. Average annual price of 2016 was $1,100. In 2017, it was $750. Just the price drop of $400 pushed the demand for chickpeas higher by 2 million tons, 2 to 2.2 million tons. And if you look at the 6 years average demand growth in India, it's above 5% in terms of CAGR if you talk about.
Which is pretty good, right?
Which is pretty good, and it's mainly because if you look at the usage of chickpeas, it's in India we work basis 25% of the chickpea demand is for the whole consumption as a whole, where you just clean it, you boil it and eat it or make sprouts out of it or make snacks out of it. 25% is for splits, but 50% of chickpea consumption is coming from the gram flour, which is primarily going into the snack food. And the growth of snack food industry in India, of course, gram flour maybe forms a smaller part of the total snack food industry because you have potato chips, you have so many other things. It's 15 to 18% in last 10 years. Annualized growth is 15 to 18% in snack food industry. So 5% year-on-year growth in chickpeas is pretty accurate, I would say.
Very good. We heard Randy talk yesterday about avocados. Are we at risk of, as the hustle and bustle goes right across these demand centres, where's the opportunity for new products, new formulations? Because the Desi fits right in that industrial slot in terms of flour and snack food and staple, chana masala and those sort of things in terms of end uses. Are we seeing a major migration into different formats or availability of the product in the market, or is it still relatively traditional?
I would still call it relatively traditional because avocado and all these products, of course, the demand for these products is growing in India, but we are talking about these products being consumed mainly in the metropolitan cities. So the demand may be shifting from pulses to, fast foods in the cities where people have more affordability and they have been consuming pulses like for years now. They are shifting to other products. But if you look at the income growth that India is having at the bottom of the pyramid, because if you look at even the government mandate, they are trying to increase the income of the farmers. They are trying to increase the income of lower middle class, the poor people. They are as of now consuming just wheat and rice. For them, the next best source of nutrition is going to come from pulses. So I don't see a shift in the traditional demand from pulses to any other product if you look at overall basket put together.
Okay. Just quickly while I'm looking to my left, we've seen Pakistan come out with some non-tariff type barriers, some tweaking of phytosanitary requirements. Do you see there's any risk of contagion with Pakistan following India's lead in terms of more government intervention?
There has been a lot of government intervention in terms of the documentation requirements for imports of pulses into Pakistan. But as of now, our production of pulses is a lot less than our local demand, and we don't foresee that happening. Maybe we might see stricter regulations, but in terms of any possibility of import tariffs or import quotas, we don't see it on the horizon. And the primary reason is because Pakistan mainly produces Desi chickpeas as the primary pulse item. Even for that, our production is a lot lower than our demand. And then if you speak about yellow peas, lentils, Kabuli chickpeas, we're totally dependent on imports. And pulses as a poor man's diet, if the government intervenes in this, then there's a high risk of prices skyrocketing.
Okay. And what about Bangladesh? Any risk of the Bangladeshi government getting involved in some of these things?
No. The government has an open policy. They want to keep prices as low as possible, and especially during Ramadan time. So that's starting from the 17th of May. The interesting thing about the chickpea consumption in Bangladesh is that 50% is consumed during this 1 month of Ramadan, and the other 50%, so 100,000 over 11 months and 100,000 during just 1 month. And the government tries to keep the prices as low as possible and keep the markets as open with least amount of intervention.
And Bharatji, it seems that with your prices higher than CFR values, you're not really being impacted by the government policy changes. Is that a fair comment on Desis?
Not really, because the government, there have been impact in Ethiopia and another major producer, which is Tanzania. Tanzania exclusively produces to export to India.
Right.
So around 60,000 tons was produced last year, out of which roughly around...
That was 60,000?
60,000 tons. Out of which roughly around 30,000 could be exported. So there is a carryover stock of 30,000, and that has led to a reduced acreage this year. And we are seeing a reduction in the output as well, expected output, because the sowing would begin in August. So the expected output is going to go down by 20%. So definitely that has been an impact. One of the phytosanitary restrictions that the government of India has imposed on Ethiopia is the methyl bromide fumigation, where they have been given up till June. But to build the capacity, it would take at least 3 to 4 years for Ethiopia to build that capacity. So that has also affected export out of Ethiopia. So virtually Ethiopia is in a situation where neither Pakistan nor India, which are the major import destinations, is working because of the government policies. So I would say that the government policies have definitely impacted these two countries.
Okay. Look, we might move to the floor. We'll get the questions. I hope there are some questions. How much was the Australia? Precisely, it was about 845,000 tonnes last year, so it was a much smaller crop than 2016, where we knocked out nearly 2.2 million tonnes of Desi chickpeas. So dry conditions absolutely impacted the productive outcomes at the end of last year. And as it stands today, we are very dry, and we've actually got very, very few Desi chickpeas in the ground, and things will need to change rapidly for us to even achieve the numbers we achieved last year. Can Bangladesh prefer to buy Indian Desi chickpeas instead of Australian chickpeas? Yeah, I mean, pure economic theory says that product moves from areas of surplus to deficit. But what will stop product moving to Bangladesh, or in fact...
Price is not the only consideration. It's a big consideration, but it would depend on the quality that India is offering. Bangladesh prefers bold size, light seed coat color, and clean product. So if India can offer that at a competitive price, then it's going to beat out Australia.
Saurabh, can India do that? Nice golden colour, big, bold, just like Australian, best quality in the world.
So we do have that quality of chickpeas, but it's mainly produced in south, in Karnataka, in the Gulbarga region, and the crop size is very small. So, I mean, India cannot meet the exact quality specifications that Australia supplies.
Right.
Because the size of the seed for the Indian chickpeas is much smaller than the Desi chickpeas that Australia grows.
Extending that question and bringing you, Bilal, into it, why can't Pakistan reliably receive Indian Desi chickpeas to meet your shortfall?
So currently, we're unable to import any chickpeas from India because the plant quarantine is not issuing import permits for any Indian origin pulses. So, which is why currently Pakistan is looking towards Australia to meet the demand for Desi chickpeas. And I'm not sure if the Indian Desi chickpeas is workable for Pakistan at the current prices.
Okay. What is the present stock of Desi chickpeas in Australia? How much of it is of lower quality, and which was affected by rains during harvest? Well, I think the technical term for how many Desi chickpeas of good quality left in Australia is sweet bugger all, which translated for Randy is not much. So, you know, the numbers tell me that the crop there should be about 150 to 200,000 tonnes of old crop stock, some of which will have been affected by rainfall. But really, that's negligible. In fact, the stuff that's coming across our weighbridges is actually not too bad. The quality is reasonably sound. But it doesn't feel like there's that much product still left on farm in Australia. So I'm of the view that there's not that much product left. And that's why I say I think the old crop situation is very, very tight, and much tighter than even the impacts of the Indian sanctions, etc., will have us be concerned about. I certainly don't feel like Australia has burdensome stock. How many likes have we got there? What quantity of Desis would be further required by Pakistan after local production? So you sort of crack at that.
Yeah, I think until the arrival of our next crop in April 2019, Pakistan can require anywhere between 200 to 300,000 tons of Desi chickpeas. Factoring into account our local production, the crop just came out last month, and also incorporating the cargo that we have already booked. Now the main question is Pakistan going to import most of it from Africa, or would the prices in Australia be workable for us?
All right. This is obviously written by a buyer, given the fact that Australia exported close to 0.6, I think it was 0.65, and how they think they can liquidate their other 0.6 million tonnes before the new harvest. Well, if you can find those other 0.6 million metric tonnes, we'll have a crack at it, but I don't think it exists. Now, we need to get some likes going here because we're only getting very small likes. So, Todd Lees, you're there, I think. You should be liking this stuff, right? I think, Fahim, you answered that question, I think, didn't you? Just what you think will buy? Based on history, Bangladesh should actually be there for another 100,000, but you've already taken 160,000.
Well, I've got the arrival figures. Jan to December 2017, we did about 185K. Now, the first 4 months of 2018, the arrival figure is 153.587K. So if we look at historic figures, on the minimum 30,000, and on the maximum about another 50 to 70,000.
Yeah, so it's not small change. There's still a bit to go.
Yeah.
So we've got Bangladesh and we've got Pakistan to receive product. And of course, we might extend that question to the UAE. What do you think the UAE will take between now and the theoretical Australian new crop? Because today it's absolutely theoretical. So.
I think we're mainly followers, so we're looking at what's happening in the world market and going hand to mouth. Most of the exporters and the importers now are, very wary of price changes. They've lost a lot of money in the past. Some of the cargo is still lying on dock, so I think they're just going to go hand to mouth. So you might see, depending on how much is imported, as I said, the total import is around 80,000 tons, so whatever's remaining would be what they will import.
So based on the stats, that would leave you with about 50,000 to move in between now and the end of September.
I think it'll be much lesser.
You think it'll be less than that?
I think it'll be less.
All right, thanks. Let's see how many likes we have now. Other than traditional Indian subcontinental markets, do you see any emerging markets for different destinations or uses? Will it be used for stock feed if supply stays high? Obviously it can be used for stock feed, but it would need to, the price would have to drop significantly. But from the panel, ideas for new uses for Desis, or are you seeing some innovation in terms of the use of Desis in how it's consumed?
I've been saying it through the whole conference. I think there is a very important point as part of the Colombo Accord, and many of the panelists here were agreeing that, many of the participants were agreeing that we need to look at another side of the coin, which is consumption. We have a lot of supply in the world, which is not going to go away very soon. And Sudhakar mentioned yesterday that there's 3 grams of per capita consumption worldwide. So I think the whole shift of our thinking should be how can we increase consumption and how can we have new avenues of consumption for pulses rather than worrying about where the stock is going to go. So snack food could be one very important part. Saurabh mentioned earlier that a lot of the population now, young population, is moving towards fast food and new types of proteins. So we need to find innovative ways of bringing them back into pea proteins and lentil proteins. So I think this is a question which is open-ended, but definitely a challenge.
Look, and I think that's a great comment to make because, when I first started coming to these conferences, we just talked about straight-out commodity, traditional usages, and now we are talking about fractionalisation and how that base and how that flour performs relative to other flours in particularly snack food, and we're obviously seeing snack food grow globally, and people do want, there's a big free-from market developing, free from gluten, free from this, free from that, and pulses, particularly Desis, fit right in there. What about in India, the largest market? What sort of innovation are you seeing? We have vegetable burgers, patties. What else are you seeing?
Yes, we do have seen chickpea burgers in few snack food centers, but it's not catching up in a big way yet. But definitely health consciousness is increasing in a big way in India, and I mean, it's still a metropolitan phenomena where more and more people are moving towards a gluten-free diet. When they go for a gluten-free diet, their consumption for pulses increases.
So I think what we're seeing, I can't see Randy here, but clearly there's an opportunity for a smashed chickpea sandwich or burger. Bharat,
I think in India, a few months back, there was a political controversy about the Prime Minister saying pakoda becho. They sell pakodas, and pakodas are made of Desi chickpeas. I don't know if that's an innovation. Just to push the production of chickpeas up.
Start promoting pakoras, get the Prime Minister on the job.
Yeah.
All right. Another question for Saurabh. Has the India domestic chickpea price bottomed? Good time to buy position. Another buyer.
It's difficult to time the market, but definitely the prices are very close to the bottom. And for anybody who wants to buy chickpeas, this is the only time in the decade that Indian government is on your side. They want you to buy chickpeas so that the prices can go to the near MSP levels. So Indian government is looking for support from the trade to buy chickpeas.
So I think that's a definite yes. It's time to buy chickpeas, everybody. All right. Okay, effect of Mr. Trump's sanctions. Ooh, that's a sticky one. I reckon Fahim, Atheeqe, you are probably the best positioned to pontificate on the effect of those sanctions.
I think Trump is a pretty smart guy, you know. He says first, he calls him Rocket Man, then he shakes hand with him. Then they said the market's going to collapse after he comes to power, and then American markets are doing very well. I think this may be a ploy, you know. Maybe he's just saying something against Iran. Next week comes with something better, sweetened deal. I mean, you never know.
You think Donald will be in Tehran next week or something?
I don't know. But with him, anything is possible. But no, generally speaking, I think it's going to play havoc with the markets, especially with the imports. So what generally happens is there's a big squeeze on the currency, so they can't really bring cargo in. So there's an opportunity for UAE. I mean, Dubai is going to become again a re-export hub. Smaller players will be out of the market again. And not to forget, they can also replace Desis with Kabulis. So the Russian Kabulis also have a chance of getting in from the top, and Kazakhstan, because in the daily staple diet, they also like Kabulis if the price is okay. So if they cannot get it, they have to find it somewhere else or find alternatives. So I think it's not going to be good generally for consumption. You're going to find 30 to 50,000 tons disappearing from the market quite easily.
Yeah, and we certainly don't need to lose that demand. Well, I guess we have to wait a little bit until we see how the Europeans respond to the United States position. So, but
I think it's also going to help increase, consumption from Pakistan through Pakistan as well, because in the past there was a lot of border trade between Iran and Pakistan, where the cargo would go into Iran through the border. So if these sanctions go into effect, then we can see this trade happening through unofficial channels via Pakistan.
That's a very good point, because it was certainly happening before Bandar Abbas opened up. So that's a great point, Bilal. Right, how much more? I think we answered that one. Does Australia Desi chickpeas production area squeezing, reducing for next sowing in 2018? If yes, then what are the reasons behind this reduction in area? Look, there's no question farmers in Australia, given half a chance, will plant Desi chickpeas. They like putting a pulse in the rotation. It's a religious experience for many farmers. They like Desi chickpeas. Desis perform very well in much of northern Australia, where we have our deep soils and nice beaches, etc. But at the end of the day, those soils are very dry today. So it's entirely academic. We need an enormous amount of rain to achieve even last year's production. I would say that there's less than, I'm going to throw it out there, 10 or 15% of the area that could be sown to Desis could actually be sown deeply into moisture. Most of the rest of the area is either just far too dry or not within 4 or 5 inches of rain of getting a plant. So we need to watch this space over the next 4 to 6 weeks. The seeding window is just opening, but we're very dry. So if we don't get any rain, then we'll be talking about an Australian-driven Desi chickpea rally because of a lack of supply. We can quite easily go back to a 300,000 or 400,000 tonne outcome based on our seasonal conditions right now. In fact, the most of the east coast is dry, so that impacts lentils and faba beans as well. So don't get bearish based on Australian supply.
Peter, I have a question for you, actually.
Oh my God, that's not allowed, I don't think, is it? Where's Randy?
This is a lot of participants have been asking me, over the last 3 days. So we talk a lot about government intervention. I'm sorry for taking the floor from you, but this was interesting. So,
as long as it's not a hard question.
We talk a lot about government intervention and in the Colombo Accord and other things, and all these factors. So I'm quite curious. What if there was no intervention at all? Free market. We discussed this morning. We didn't have a reply to it, but I'm just now trying to brainstorm and see what if there was absolutely no intervention. The Colombo Accord actually worked. Government said, you know what? It's a free market. Do what you want. Grow how much you want. Sell how much you want. I think this is something interesting, right? To think about what would be the final effect. Is it really good not to have intervention, or is it good to have controlled intervention? I think we're veering away from the topic, but just.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We did talk about it this morning, but I guess where would the market be today if in fact the market was free? So Saurabh, starting with you, where would you think the market would be in terms of CFR Navashiva prices if in fact there was no intervention at all and we were where we are today?
If there was no government intervention in India, then the prices in India for all pulses will be much lower than where they are today. And the objective of the government to get the Indian pulse production higher will be completely defeated, because there is global surplus for peas, lentils, and if India had not put the duty or say restriction, then pea values at $260, $270, I'm sure chickpea prices in India, which are currently at 35,000, 36,000, would have been below 30,000.
Yeah, so, I think that's reasonable. I think the CFR prices could actually be lower than what they are today. But I guess some of these changes occurred after most of, certainly from an Australian perspective, goods had been shipped, which means that we haven't seen the full impact of these changes. If we were to have a lot of rain and we seeded a crop to produce 800 or 900,000 tonnes at the end of 2018, then potentially the impact on Australia wouldn't be seen or won't be seen until the end of this year or early next year. So it's an interesting question, but I think I agree with Saurabh. What would you say, Bilal?
I think pulses prices in Pakistan would equate to the prices in India, because being such a close neighbor, any pulse item exported to Pakistan from India can arrive in within 2 days. So I would say whatever the prices of all pulses would be in India, Pakistan would be reflective of something similar.
Yep. We've got 10 seconds left on the clock here. Non-GMO endorsement. That's already happening, and Australia can provide a side letter, I believe, with regards to the fact there is no GMO Desis in production. Mr. Saurabh, please advise on 2018. Yeah, we answered that, I think. I think that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, and gentlemen of the panel. I thank you very much, and I thank our audience for being very engaged throughout, and look forward to the balance of the convention.
Step forward and give us a photograph. Sure, Peter. Yes. Once a great panel, ladies and gentlemen. Good information, and this is the last panel for the day, but full of information and keeping it very interesting right up to the really end. Before you leave the hall, got to tell you a couple of things that we will reconvene here this evening at 7 o'clock for the gala closing reception, which will be right here in the hall. We will be redoing this hall for the gala closing, so when you leave the hall, please ensure to take all your collaterals with you, because this entire hall will be redone for the gala closing. Also to remind you that if in case you missed the gala tonight, that we start tomorrow at 9:30 with the registrations, 10 o'clock with the first session on Black Mat Pay. Of course, we'll be closing by lunch. And just to remind you that in case you haven't yet made arrangements for checking out or departure to the hotel or wherever you're going, from the hotel to the airport, where you're going, you can do that tonight and be ready for a great day tomorrow. With that, it's a conclusion of this second day. Gentlemen, if you exit from that side. Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir, would you move? Conclusion of second day. Pulses 18, Colombo. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, and do remember to please take all your collaterals with you as you exit the hall. We'll be requiring the hall absolutely empty to start off this evening's gala. Thank you, and bye for now.